What's up, everybody? It's your favorite builder's favorite nerd, and today we are going to do a little overview of the diorama that I finished actually some time ago at this point. You can see I'm in shorts and short sleeve shirt, and I can tell you that that is not the conditions right now. Actually, it wasn't too bad today. Story for another time. Anyway, this is about the Starscream Coronation diorama that I built. Now, this is not a tutorial. The videos themselves are a tutorial. They're sped up 4 times, I think, here. And the tutorials are on the Patreon. The link to the Patreon is in the description. That's where I kind of go through like everything in terms of how I do it, the measurements, etc., etc. But this is purely just talking about the process. And I actually have a fair bit to talk about. But one thing I want to talk about before we get there is I'm going to do something a bit different this time, and I'm going to let the audio play of when I first put it in and my like real reaction to it, because I do end up liking it. So, you know my rules for this stuff, or I hope you do. And if you haven't, get ready, because I'm getting ready to tell you. So it doesn't matter, I guess, either way. That's me checking out some stuff. I'm big on that. But my rules for Transformers dioramas are to never do anything from that's cartoony, like no cartoon backdrops, to make them sort of domestic, to make them Earth backdrops. And the other idea is to have something that illustrates their scale, right? And that's gotten a bit trickier as of late with some of my designs. But this one in particular breaks the rule. It breaks the rule of a, Earth-based diorama. So this one does take place in space, obviously, from the 86 movie when Starscream is going through his coronation. Or bad comedy, depending on how you want to see it. And I was a little hesitant to do it, but I thought, like, what better place? It's super iconic, to the franchise, to the story, to the lore, to the mythology of what Transformers are. And it's also, it's like the pivotal Galvatron scene, right? And this is a Galvatron shelf. So it's what I went with. So the next thing I was going to do was not I wasn't going to have it look just like the cartoon, right? So that was my plan from that point. When I made that decision, I was like, look, I'm not going to have it look like it just walked off the screen, but instead have it kind of look like it would look if it were in a realistic environment, And the reason why I'm so stuck on that is because a lot of these toys are becoming so cartoon accurate that when you start putting them in the cartoon backgrounds, it all starts looking like a cartoon. And cartoons from the 80s look cheap. They're great, but they simultaneously look cheap. So I don't want my displays to look like that, personally. Other people do, and that's fine. So so that was the approach, and that's a big part of this is finding out how to make this work. And then the next biggest challenge was the layout, because those figures are so huge. So I made some sacrifices in order to kind of pull off the aesthetic that I wanted, and also have it, be functional in the same regard. And the sacrifices were basically that there are 2 additional platforms for smaller figures. And my thought process there is maybe the clones, just to have room for spillover. At this point, as a masterpiece collector, I don't think we know what we're going to get anymore. Getting it all doesn't seem realistic anymore. So I'm kind of like filling in big spaces and then leaving room for smaller spaces as it allows. And what I mean by smaller spaces are for smaller bots. So there's room in this diorama, those 2 platforms next to the steps, for the clones, perhaps, maybe Runabout and Runamuck, if they ever get made, like little stuff like that, that will allow me to put more figures in it, but not, overcrowd it, and also put them on different spaces, kind of dimensionally, vertically. Because filling the vertical space is just as important as filling the horizontal space, which is why I keep my Transformers out of DTOFs, because I don't feel like they fill the vertical space very well. So in that regard, I think it's successful as well. And guess what? And the truth is just like I learned from all my Marvel Legends stuff, if they don't fill that space, I got good news. It still looks good without them. You know what I mean? Like if I can't fill that space with Runabout and Run Amok or the clones, or, I could probably even put those Squawk Box and Beatbox or whatever the name is, the monkey and the Falcon. I could probably put those guys in there if they ever did them. And if they don't, it's cool because it looks good without it. So that's a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now. I'm simultaneously, obviously I'm trying to make what I have work, but at the same time, I'm also trying to make it so that if nothing else gets made, that I'm happy with the end result. Because that's something I've picked up on from my Marvel Legends display, is like I'm missing characters there, but at the same time, I am happy with what I have. Like, and not just content, but legit satisfied. So like anything they make now is a bonus. And that's kind of where I want to get to with Transformers, because the light at the end of the tunnel is getting weaker and weaker as time goes by. So that kind of explains the layout portion of it. And, and then now it's just a matter of getting it done. I'll tell you that I remember that the thing that was most challenging was the Decepticon symbol. Like obviously in the Patreon, we go over it that much, in detail. So, I can't really talk about it here. I feel like I'd be ripping them off, but I can tell you that it was tricky, that we did break it, and other things. Oh, let me talk about this for a minute. So like, a lot of times I have been fortunate enough to be gifted things, while doing this. Like people like have been like, hey, you might like this, you might dig this, or whatever. And I appreciate it because it allows me the opportunity to kind of put my hands on something and learn something. But at the same time, like, my draw to this stuff, it has nothing to do with how cool something is. It has to do with how connected to it I am. So these two things here have been gifted to me, and they've sat on a shelf, and they've kind of just taken up space. And when I see them, I think about those gifts, and I think about those individuals. Shout out to Madge and JG. But they don't mean a whole lot to me other than the meaningfulness of the gift in and of itself. It's tricky to say that without sounding disrespectful. I don't mean to, but, I still don't care about Gundam, like in spite of having those things, or Brave or whatever. So, I had this idea that, well, what if I glued them and then painted them to look like the statues for Galvatron's, diorama. And then this way, I get to appreciate the gifts. The gifts have become part of my display. They're now like an integral part of the finished, room and space. So like they're like, not only do they mean even more to me now, they also mean more to the space. They're more purposeful. And, but I didn't want to be disrespectful, because that's not really my vibe. So I put it out on Patreon, and folks got with me and were like, look, just, I gave it to you. You can chop it up into little pieces and glue it to your face and pretend you're Santa Claus if you want to, as far as I'm concerned. But, it sounds good to me. So when I had some blessings, it felt even better. And they are the thing that kind of I use to kind of ground this thing in scale. So while I wasn't able to really keep true to my word of keeping it, terrestrial, I was able to add some scale in, which was nice. So that was a big part of this too, dude. Just looking at this Decepticon symbol every time I see it, it's giving me PTSD. These things here, they're in the movie. They're like these little like lantern things, and we just decided to make more ornamental. And I don't know. I don't think they look great. I think that we did the best we could, and I don't think that they take away. And I think when you look at the diorama, you don't notice them really as being distracting. But it's one of the things that when it was all said and done, I was like, I'm not super satisfied with that. But they're there for like the hardcore fans that are like, well, why didn't you put that there? Well, I did. They just, aren't the best. And yeah, as I'm recording this, I'm actually finishing up another diorama today for Transformers, which actually finishes off my first whole complete Billy bookshelf of dioramas for like a finished display for Transformers. So I'm pretty excited about it. And then I have another one coming that's already done. I just got to release the videos on Patreon first and then put this stuff out. Yeah, I'll tell you, like, one thing I've really learned how to do over the course of this and the Marvel Legends one is stonework. And it's just like so much of this stuff keeps coming back to it. It's kind of why I like doing, I think, the Star Wars stuff sometimes a little bit more, is because it's not always the same type of thing over and over again. But, you know, you got to do what you got to do. You got to make it work. You got to make it look accurate. And you got to be happy with the display. And even this, like, if you think about how much space of this diorama I'm actually donating to those gifts, you know, like just to tie in the scene, it's significant. You know, it's a significant amount of time. I'll tell you, it's a significant amount of space, rather. I'll tell you this, this airbrush, I was gifted this airbrush from a friend of mine for Christmas one year. And I'm not entirely happy with it, like, as I continue to move forward. And he uses his for something completely different than what I use mine for, so I guess that makes sense. But if anybody has any good airbrush recommendations, that's a hardy airbrush that can kind of take a beating, because, you know, like I run through it, you know, and I run paint through it. Not, you know, I use airbrush paint, but I don't always thin it down and everything, I guess, the way I should. And we're getting ready to wrap up here, so I want to make sure that I leave plenty of room for these end vocals that are like the real time. But I can tell you, like, the more Transformers dioramas I've been doing recently, the happier I've been with them. And it's starting to really bring the space together, and like to a space that's been super challenging to me. Like, even my wife has kind of like been unimpressed with the Transformers stuff overall because of how it's laid out. Like, even she has had to admit that it's starting to come together. And to be fair, I've had to admit it to myself, because I can be a bit of a pessimist sometimes. But it's starting to work out. Here we go. And there it is. I'm pretty happy with it without figures in it. The trick is always with figures, right? But yeah, pretty happy with that. And there it is, populated. And I think it works. I'm pretty happy. The good ones are starting to outweigh the bad ones, which is nice. Yeah, I dig it.